And with Anthony Richardson, what was the blueprint for development, if any?
Point, I did think about your brother a lot,
Yeah.
when we did that, because I'd been a part of that. So you've got to have a vision for the player and what he, how we're going to use him and how he's going to fit within the offense and the scheme. And I thought Shane had a tremendous vision.
All right, so this is a real treat. We love having GMs on. This is Chris Ballard, one of the best in the game. And one thing I appreciate about Chris Ballard is he's put together a D-line that is downright scary. And I'm looking forward to watch it come together. Looking forward to watching the Colts in general. Chris, how you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for coming on. The first question I had for you, 2013, y'all draft Kyle Long in Chicago, and then you say, "Fuck this, I'm out." What, 2 weeks later? What's the story there? How much did you have to do with getting big man to Chicago?
No, I was involved in it without question. Phil Emery loved him, and I remember the discussion was because he'd only played like 6 games in college. I remember telling Phil, and Phil loved him. I kept going, Phil, he is an absolute freak. I said, are you sure he's going to get to us where he's at? And I think it was like 3 days later. Mm-hmm. I was in Kansas City with John Dorsey and Coach Reed. But I'll say this, like his success he was so physically gifted and such a talented guy. So Robert Garza when I coached, Robert Garza played for us in Kingsville, Texas.
Yeah.
And I remember Robert texting me during training camp when I was in Kansas City, and he said, he goes, "You're not here anymore." He said, "But this guy's going to the Pro Bowl." And, so he was right.
Yeah. And Garza was one of his best vets.
Yeah. No, Rob was a great pro. That whole, like that time there, because Garza was with us for a long time, and he was trained Olin Kreutz, who was just tremendous as a player and as a leader. Him and Rob were real close, and he kind of showed him the way. And Robert's so loyal. I remember when the organization finally moved on from Olin, Robert felt guilty playing center. I'd finally told him, I said, "Look, man," I said, "he's not coming back, and you can extend your career for a long time if you do this," which he ended up doing.
Yeah, that's so funny, man. I remember being in St. Louis trying to change my number when Leonard Little retired. Spags made me wait a whole year just in case he was coming back. I was stuck out there at 72 for a whole another year, but sometimes you wait for those guys to walk through the door. The thing I was going to ask you, I'm really interested in this. When I was in St. Louis, we had a real big D-line. We had built like y'all, where it's like, hey, we're building through these guys and we're going to put first rounders into this group, but also the D tackles were huge. They were tall guys. One thing I noticed about y'all's entire team is they're great football players, but they seem to be guys that you want to look good walking off the bus a little bit. Stewart 6'4", Defoe's up there in the clouds. You got a lot of big tight ends, big receivers. What's your philosophy when it comes to player size? Is that a thing that you chase a little bit, the length, especially at certain positions where you might not think of it?
Yeah, I think it matters. It's a big man's game. And of course, there's going to be exceptions, that go on in play. We try to slant towards, more height, weight, and speed at each and every position. Now they gotta have good tape. We're not just taking all height, weight, and speed guys, but they got to have good tape. But I do think it's a big man's game. I do think that those big men disrupt the game more, and especially third down. And look, I am front. It's just the way I've been trained in this league, both O-line and D-line, just very front driven. And I just believe as the season wears on, they're going to win games for you down the stretch. And those are the two positions, next to quarterback. O-line and D-line, like when you start, if you don't have enough depth there, guys wear down. And even more, if you have injuries at the position, finding replacements is almost next to impossible. So you better load up on them in the offseason when you get a chance.
Who's a guy, when you mentioned, Garza hitting you up and saying, hey, this guy's going to be pretty good, who's a guy that you saw right away in camp and you were like, yep? Is there one guy you remember? Because I remember Aaron Donald.
Oh,
Aaron Donald, of course, like you could be Ray Charles could see it. But I told Les Snead, I said, hey, y'all need to make him the highest paid defensive lineman in the league. I know that's not how it works, but day 3, we saw it.
Yeah, through my career, like in Chicago, Tillman, Charles was pretty much an instant. The second he got there, you knew, hey, this guy's going to be really good. I thought Lance Briggs was very similar. I thought Hester, like the first game against Green Bay, he juiced one. You're like, okay, we got something here. When I was in KC, Tyreek Hill, I'll never forget during rookie mini camp, we kind of took him as a returner, and Coach Reed, put him out there at wideout. And next thing you know, we're all looking at each other like, oh man, this guy's got some real special in him. And then Quenton Nelson and Darius Leonard, like the second they got here, there was no, I don't know, like confidence is, some guys just believe. It's almost a naive confidence with them that we don't care, where we came from. Darius was South Carolina State, and you never would have known it. Because the second he stepped on the field, I remember the first practice, he missed all of OTAs because he had a quad injury from training. And the first day of training camp, he picks off Andrew. But they just belong. So I do believe in that. I do believe that when guys, especially young players, when their confidence level is so high that they just know they belong. And I know you've seen it too. Some guys, it takes a little longer to build their confidence, but a lot of times the ones that become really, really great players, man, they just know it. They know.
Yeah. They're not overthinking it, which is something I'm sure you look for, is a fine line between being a smart football player, preparing, taking care of all the details, but also not overthinking and the paralysis by analysis thing. You see that all the time. I actually just spent a couple days with Quenton Nelson. It felt like a couple days, but I think maybe it was just one day. I went to the Beer Olympics in Nashville, and he was my partner at the Beer Olympics. So me and Q threw back some cold beers, and I got to say that guy, hey, you can't find a bigger fan of that kid than me right now, because after spending a day with him, you really get it. He's all ball. Not only is he built like a brick shit house and doesn't care how he dress, anything like that, he's just all ball. We talk ball for about an entire day, and he's the type of guy you can kind of build your whole program around. How's he doing now? I know he had some injuries over the last couple of years. Is he rounding into form again?
Here's why I love him. Like, he's really loyal, Chris. To his teammates, to anybody that's like, he'll call bullshit on you quickly. And the one thing is, you can't bullshit him, because if you try to, you're done. Like, you're done. You're done. Like, if you're not honest with him and tell him the truth, you're done. But if you do, he will go to the end of the earth for you as a teammate, as a coach, as an executive. It doesn't matter. Once he knows that he can trust you, he will go to the end of the earth. And he is all ball, and he cares deeply about his performance and winning. And it bothers him when we don't do well. And he is not afraid to voice his opinion, which I like. Like, one thing that never has bothered me is when players voice their opinion. Like, and even if I don't agree with it, that's okay. But tell me what you think. And one thing I don't ever have to worry about Quenton is telling me what he thinks.
Yeah. No, he was a beauty. He was awesome. I see why you guys love him so much, not just to play on the field. He pulled the first time I ever touched him on the field. Y'all were playing us in Philly. You remember that game? And
yep,
it was 18. Andrew Luck's
last. Yeah, it was 2018. Yeah,
we had him backed up on the goal line, and he pulled on a counter, and I was like, "Is there an F-250 on the field? Like, what the fuck? Just I was like, damn, you know how some people just they feel different, you know, when you run.
Yeah.
He's one of those guys. I kind of wonder, and I'm glad to get a chance to meet you because I've been following you guys and through the whole quarterback carousel thing. And you know, I was a Carson fan, and I know you were so close to getting that playoff win against Buffalo. The whole question I have is, you know, the Andrew Luck retirement kind of puts you guys in a place where you can't plan, right? And then you're like, all right, well, we've got a pretty good team. We need competent quarterbacking year to year. You guys kind of went through that cycle. Is there anything you would have done differently? And this isn't a leading question. I'm not saying I have the answers because when you had Phillip and when you had Carson, I was like, hey, this is going to work. You know, so you fooled me too a little bit. Do you ever look back and say, hey, I would have done it a different way? And how close were you guys at your closest during that period?
Well, all right. So 18, we were really young. Andrew was just coming off the injury.
Yeah.
And we get hot, playing really good football, kind of ran out of gas in the second round of the play, beat Houston in the first round. And, the second round, I thought we just kind of ran out. A young team, there was their 19th game. They had to win like 9 or 10 in a row to get in the playoffs. I just thought we exhausted so much energy after starting 1-5. We kind of ran out of juice. And I thought 19 going into that season, we were about to be really a force to be reckoned with. And then Andrew retired. And the one thing I refuse to do is make an excuse. I love Andrew. I do. I care deeply about Andrew Luck. He had some unfortunate injury things that had happened to him. And I think a lot of it, he was playing through things that I'm not necessarily sure he should have been playing through, but he did because of the type of teammate he was. And so we go through 19, things don't go our way. We actually started out really well. I think we were 5-2, and I didn't do a good enough job building the team depth at that time to overcome, the loss of the quarterback. And Jacoby actually played really well for us, Jacoby Brissett. And, going into 20, we had an opportunity to sign Phillip, and his history with Frank Wright. It was just kind of a no-brainer, at the time. And Phillip and that was during COVID in 20, which was not easy to navigate. But Phillip brought an energy that was really good, and had a really good football team. We took Buffalo to the wire, and we missed some opportunities in the game looking back. And then going into 21, after Phillip retired, the transition when we traded for Carson, especially with Frank's relationship with him, we thought it was going to be the best world for us that we were able to transfer into a quarterback that Frank knew had talent, had won games. And, at one point we're 9-6. And we had a slow start to the season. Then we ended up 9-6. I think we had beaten Buffalo at Buffalo. We'd beaten Frisco at Frisco. We had beaten New England at home. I mean, we had weathered a stretch that I was like, okay, we are really about to take a run here. And the wheels came off at the end. And it's unfortunate, but it happened. And it came off. And I think a lot of Carson, it just didn't work out at the end of the day. I don't look back because, like a lot of times with the quarterback position, especially in the draft, the second, you got to be right on the guy you take, especially if you're getting up high. And we were never in a position high enough to really get one that we were willing to bet on. And when the wheels kind of came off in 22, is when we kind of reset. I don't regret the decisions we made. We thought at the time, with the information we had, it was the best thing to do. I mean, it's easy to hindsight anything and look back and say, definitely learn from it. But I don't regret the way we did, the way we handled it. We were trying to stay relevant, and we had a good competitive team that we wanted to give a chance to win.
Yeah. Was there ever a point, because a human being, man, you can't help it. I've been around Andrew just a little bit, and I couldn't help being a fan. And I was hoping for y'all's sake he would, if he was happy with the decision, walk back through the door and say, I miss football. When he'd come around, was it clear immediately that the fire was out? Or was there a moment 2-3 years in where you're like, okay, he ain't coming back now?
Yeah, I kind of knew it all along. I mean, sure, in the back of my mind, I thought, well, man, it'd be nice if he would come back. But I also know Andrew well enough that, look, did Andrew miss competing Absolutely. I think he'll tell you that. Did he miss like, I think one of the things that are what made Andrew such a unique player and teammate was how much he cared about the guys in the locker room and how much he valued the relationships in the locker room. Like, that meant something to Andrew Luck. And he took time to really create and foster those relationships so that there was a level of trust, when the season started. So I think if you asked him today what he missed the most, he would tell you that part of it, the relationship aspect of what the locker room brings you, which I think every player that leaves the game will tell you that's what they miss the most is the locker room and what it gave them and the relationships that you were able to form and go through things that the general public just doesn't quite understand that dynamic and the human interactions that take place on a daily basis in there. But in terms of him playing again, I was in the high 90s that he would never play again. Of course, there was days when I was like, okay, be nice, but I knew we had to move forward as an organization. So it didn't consume me.
Yeah, timing was tough. I mean, I'll never forget when he retired. It's one of those things where I'll never forget where I was as a sports fan. There's a player. It's just so non-standard, the timing, but I also know who he is. And I imagine what you just said played heavily into not being able to walk away until the last minute. You fight your instincts to walk away because you love your teammates and you don't want to let people down. And then it's just too late. And you say, hey, I got to walk. I just remember where I was when he did it. And I imagine who he is had a lot to do with why that went relatively sideways. Some people would say sideways, but it's just people don't understand when the fire's out, it's out.
That's it. And like I told, and Andrew, I mean, as you can imagine, we had long talks about this, but like I thought it took up a lot of courage. Even though I didn't, and he knows this, I didn't 100% agree with what he was doing. But on the flip side of that, I also wasn't critical of what he was doing because I understood his path and his journey because we had gotten so close. So it took a lot of courage for him to do that. And it's a shame we live in a society that, the instant reaction of people and the criticism that he took, I vehemently disagreed with. And it's a shame because, and I think time heals all wounds. And I think you're seeing that now as he's coming forward. But, now he needs, we need to celebrate Andrew and what he stands for because he stands for all the right stuff.
No question. And with Anthony Richardson, a guy I was really excited you guys took. I mean, you watch his tape, it's tantalizing. I'll always take the upside. And I know when you're looking at him, you see everything, it's currently available to him in his toolbox, but there's also a projection, right? There's we see this guy developing. What was the blueprint for development, if any, in your head? Was there another example, another player? I know comps can be kind of polarizing, but as far as the development goes.
Well, okay, so a couple of things. One, I did think about your brother a lot, when we did that because I'd been a part of that. So, taking much different taking an offensive lineman than a quarterback, with the limited amount of experience. But then when I have a head coach, Shane Steichen, who is outstanding in terms of his understanding what the position needs and can do and how to fit the offense around it. And then his history of doing it, from Phillip Rivers to Justin Herbert to Jalen Hurts, to watch the just fundamental changes that offensively he was able to make the quarterback successful really helped me understand, okay, this is the vision you've got to have a vision for the player and what he, how we're going to use him and how he's going to fit within the offense and the scheme. And I thought Shane had a tremendous vision. Now he did not have the same production as a lot of quarterbacks have, but the flashes were loud and they were really strong. I kept watching, and he's probably a little different, but he reminded me a little of Steve McNair when he was coming out of Alcorn. Now, I was coaching still at the time, but and McNair broke every record and had every, you know, small school record for a quarterback, but just their play style I thought was very similar.
Yeah, and having played for Jeff Fisher, he loved Steve McNair as a guy, as a player. I mean, and I watch Anthony, and immediately, even as a D lineman who appreciates a quarterback putting his head down every now and again, I know we're all saying the same thing. Get your big ass out of bounds, brother. And then also, I had Dawson Knox on last year from the Bills, and I asked him the same question about Josh. I said, it's a lot of fun, but you need your guy back there healthy, right? So how do you get Josh to slide? And they said they had a reward system for him where if he slides in a game, somebody has to wear a jockstrap to practice on Monday. And so I'm wondering, if you guys have thought of any incentive to get Anthony Richardson's big ass down or out of bounds.
Golly, I mean, instinctively as a player, when you're and Andrew, I dealt with this with Andrew, because that was when I took the job here, that was the talk, is that he wanted to run everybody over and wouldn't step out of bounds. And, that in 18, when he had such a big year, he actually, there would be moments when he still would take people on when we needed a play, but for the most part, he figured it out. And I think Anthony's just got to, you don't want to strip the instincts from him.
Right.
And you want him to play the game. So everybody's going to say, well, you got to, but he's got to play. And I don't want to strip him. And I know Shane doesn't want to strip him. So just know the time and place in a game when it's okay. And then there's other times when, okay, we need to protect ourselves here, and that's okay.
Yeah, I think that comes with time. Like, I remember being young and forgetting what part of the game, the situation I was in, running up the field in the red zone like a mad dog in a meat house, or, or running by the quarterback, or forgetting that we were in 4-minute mode. Like, it just takes time for any player to kind of find themselves grounded in that situation. And maybe that's the same thing with a quarterback. And for him, talking about young players, I mentioned this offline, right? When you got on, you got the stud. I think. The guy's toolbox, Latu, is unbelievable. He reminded me of T.J. Watt a little bit. I've heard that. He's an option rusher, which I love. You can tell he doesn't go into it with a set plan. What have you seen so far from him competing against the good guys here at offensive tackle at the pro level, and how excited are you to see him develop?
Well, until we get the pads on, this. Until we get the pads on, it's a little hard to really make a full evaluation of anybody. Especially up front. I got to temper everybody's feelings in the building during OTAs that we're not cutting the team before we actually play football. But saying that, he is very skilled. Yeah. And I thought the TJ Watt that's a really good comparison. That's, we made some mention of that too. But here's what I know. He's a great kid. He works. He wants to be the best he can be. So he exhausts himself each and every day, to take in everything he can to learn. And it's going to be fun to watch him in camp. And this as much as anybody, it's hard for young rushers in this league. They're not used to the techniques and the talent that they're about to deal with on the offensive line that they had. It's nothing against what the kids playing in college, but these are grown men playing tackle and guard and center in our league that have been well schooled and trained. And there's a little bit of an adjustment period. But to Latu's credit, and it'll be interesting to see over the next month, how he continues to develop. He is an option rusher, and he is extremely instinctive and athletic. He does some freaky things just with no pads on. So we're excited to add him to to the group and think we have a really, really good defensive line group to throw at people this year.
Yeah, we used to roll our eyes when it was no pads, one-on-ones. Like, what are we doing out here? It's just that we're not figuring anything out. If anything, you get embarrassed, and it's not real.
It makes no. I mean, look, it's good to get the reputation. The reps are great, but until we get the pads on, we're just we're not playing real football yet. I mean, you got to get the pads on. Players change when the pads come on. Every year there's 5 or 6 guys everybody's all excited about, and sometimes it works, but for the most part, when every player changes, it's my issue a little bit with young quarterbacks today in high school and all the 7-on-7, which is, look, it's great for reads and they get throws, but they don't have the threat of being hit. Like, it's a different game when that quarterback knows he's going to get the shit knocked out of him. Like, he is not looking at this defense the same way as he is in 7-on-7 when the threat of getting pounded is in the equation.
Yeah, no question. I know camp coming up, for somebody old like me, I kind of just set my calendar so I can kind of chuckle when I wake up the morning of the 24th. I don't have to go, but it's coming, and I kind of wonder, what's Shane's camp like? I mean, everybody's got a different kind of style. What's his camp like?
No, it's we get after it. Not sure, our practices are not long, but they're intense. So, I mean, there's a lot of, that's kind of the point he makes to the team is that, look, I'm going to take something off you in terms of the time we're going to be out here. But when we're out here, we're working, and it's full speed, and it's physical. And we will have some physical spots in camp, especially on the fronts, to get them ready to play. It's one of and Shane and I have talked a lot about this because, walk through, when you get to the point in the season when it's time to walk through, which is good. And especially for the vet players that need to walk through. But your fundamentals, you can never lose your fundamentals, especially up front and in terms of pad levels. So you've got to, even during the season, there's points where you still got to be able to get some pad work in. Doesn't mean you have to beat on them every day, but at least for a certain amount of time during the season, you need to be able to get some pad work in just so your pad level doesn't get high. You can watch as the season goes on. Just watch teams across the league, and you'll see who's practicing in pads and who's not, because pad level will slowly rise on certain teams. Some guys are able to get away with it, and some teams can't.
Which is amazing that San Francisco is so damn good in the run game, because from what I hear, it's pretty chill out there. Same thing with McVay and the way he runs his practices, but I'm with you. I think there has to be, as late as you can do it, you got to put shells on a Wednesday.
Yeah.
Inside run, and then take them off.
Yeah, exactly.
No better feeling
strip them
than after a good inside run period, you put them off to the side, and then you go get your fast work. So, one thing I wanted to ask you about was Mitchell, AD Mitchell. I liked what you had to say. For one, I like a guy who's got a big vocabulary like you.
Oh, it's very educated vocabulary too.
I got the same vocab. But, you colorfully stated why some of this stuff is bullshit. And it feels like there's a lot of games that get played with guys, with agents and with teams trying to drive guys up and down. And I just think, I think the same way as you. I think you're talking about a young man's future. And I just don't like it. Can you expound on what you hate about the current climate when it comes to leading up to the draft and some of the smoke screens?
We beat up people regularly, and it's like, in terms of me and okay, we can, you know what? We've been doing this long enough, and I never shy away from criticism, and Lord knows I deserve it. There's times when I'll hear something, I go, well, fuck, they got that right. I mean, I deserve to be kicked in the balls for that. Yeah. But kids if we sit here and act like we were perfect coming out of college, and kids today, they make mistakes. That's how they grow and they learn. And they're not all perfect. There's not a perfect. And for us to, it what bothers me is that people entrust us sometimes with information that is pretty sensitive, and we have no problem giving it to other people. Like I wouldn't give a shit if I were other team. I wouldn't tell us anything
Yeah.
because if they tell the truth, so we can just know who we're getting. How do we help this young man be the best he can be with it when he's got issues going on or something going on in his life? And so it bothers me when we, as a scouting group, give that information out.
Yeah.
And it's not always scouts. I mean, there's other equations that happen, but we're tearing people down instead of trying to build them up. And that's probably where my biggest struggle comes at times. And look, it's human nature. We're all, I tend to look at the bright side of what someone can be. And I'm pretty forgiving. When they make a mistake, especially when they're 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 years old, 23. I mean, they're young guys, man. They're not fully formed grown men.
Yeah, no, you're right, man. And I just appreciate you saying that because I think guys can change a lot too. Some of the best
Absolutely.
you would have read their sheet coming out and been like, what the fuck? But I just wanted to slide that in there because I think that was a really good thing. And then the other thing was the Pittman Jr. And I got a chance to interview Pittman at the Super Bowl. I think he's a great kid. You could tell right away. Glad you guys got that deal done. But then he's getting the whole team together in LA. I always wondered this when you have the off-season stuff with the way the schedule is now, you want some guys getting together, but you don't want them getting hurt. When you see that stuff, is it kind of a mixed emotion where you're like, hey, guys, be careful, but I am so glad that our team seems to be taking ownership?
Yeah, I don't sweat it. I mean, look, it's football, and guys, you got to, you got to work out and train. They have to.
Yeah.
So it's just part of it. That's why I don't get cringy either during practice when it gets physical. I mean, it's just part of it. And one thing I'll say about Mike Pittman, who I just think the world of, he's a tremendous competitor. And it's easy to poke holes in people. But all I know is he shows up every year and he catches 80 balls for over 1,000 yards. And he competes and freaking cares. Right? I mean, like he's another one that will not bite his tongue. I mean, when he's not feeling it or happy, he has no problem coming down to my office. Funny story. So 22, I totally jacked us all up. I mean, we're all freaking jacked up, and a lot of it was my fault. And Pitt had come down a few times. Just going off. Finally, at the end of the year, like I'm like a beat up boxer by that point, man. We're getting our ass beat every week. It's not fun for anybody. Pitt comes down, pokes his head in the door, and I go, "What do you want?" And he goes, "I just wanted to say hello." He goes, "Every time I come down here, I'm bitching. I just wanted to see how you're doing."
Oh, that's great.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
great, though. That's cool. I mean, having GMs that you can visit and bullshit with. I mean, Joe Douglas was great that way. Les.
Yep.
Just that makes it a lot easier when it comes time to make hard decisions and come together. Last one for you. Appreciate the time. You guys finished last year. And by the way, Shane gets a lot of credit for going from quarterback to quarterback. How about the job y'all did with Gardner and being right there? And I think the Houston Texans are a really good football team.
Yep.
And you guys are right there. And I don't question the call because it's right there. But the whole thing to me is, and this goes for if I were interviewing Doug or, whoever down in Jacksonville, anybody in the division, CJ Stroud changes things a little bit, having seen him play. Does
Yep.
it reinforce why you got your Stewarts, your Buckners, your Pays, your Latus? And is this going to be a rivalry because you're from Galveston? I think you've lived in Houston. You sound Texas.
Oh, yeah. No, I didn't lose that.
You opened with these guys this year. You finished with them last year. Talk me through what the landscape looks like now that the Texans and Stroud are here, and is this a fun rivalry?
Well, and the whole division, we kind of downplay, but no, I mean, there's no look. At the end of last year, I thought both us and the Texans were playing really good football, and it didn't surprise me when that game came down to the last minutes of the game, and we didn't make a play, and they did, and they won the game, and Stroud made some tremendous plays in the game, and but it was a tight game, came down to the last minute of the game, and Houston made more plays at the end to win it. But the one thing I remember telling Shane, I said, look, whoever, us or them win and gets in the playoffs, we're going to make noise because we're playing as good as anybody. But I don't want to discount what Jacksonville is. A very talented football team. I know Doug very well from Kansas City. And as you know him from Philly, and he's an outstanding football coach, and he's got a really good staff. And they've hired a D coordinator from Atlanta who I thought did a tremendous job a year ago. So they're going to be good. And then, we've got Tennessee who did a lot in the offseason and hired Brian Callahan, who I actually interviewed here, who I thought was outstanding. And I know his dad, who he hired, Billy, from Wisconsin. When I played at Wisconsin, he was our O-line coach. So, and he's as good as any O-line coach in the league. So they're going to be better. So our division is, I think, sometimes doesn't always get enough credit. It's about, I think after this year it will. It's about to be excellent.
Man, they had a Denard up there in Tennessee. You got now you got Snead, you got Simmons on the same deep. I think Tennessee's going to be solid. You got a great point. It ain't just about you and Houston.
No,
it's the whole division. So I wish you the best of luck, and
I appreciate it.
Really enjoy talking to you, and I enjoy watching you guys play. That D-line's a lot of fun.
Thank you. No, thanks for having me on, man. I enjoy listening to your stuff.
I appreciate you, and hopefully catch you soon.
Yeah, anytime.